Yeah, I mean the other thing to look at all these releases, if you want to cover them in a nutshell. So when Nick Khan goes into his position and what it is, it's different to Vince because he's been given the what is called the fiduciary responsibility to look at all the expenditures that are going out. So when he immediately looked at what was happening over at NXT and WWE, and it totaled up to $112 million that was going out a year. I immediately was told that they're trying to cut this down to 70 million that was going out because that's seen as reasonable. So 42, I don't think they've reached the number yet. I don't think they've made $42 million of salary cuts at this moment in time. In addition to that, a lot of these people, when you look at Bray Wyatt sitting out and having no ideas for Braun Strowman, everybody else can be rehired on smaller contracts or can be rehired when they actually have an idea for them. I think we're going to be seeing a lot less of these 3 and 5 year deals at the moment, which a lot of guys have. A load of guys are walking around with these deals. The other thing to point out as well is that 2020 made it a lot easier to fire some guys because some of the bigger guys don't have minimum dates on their contract. I don't think what happened to the last contract when you're looking at someone like a Rey Mysterio, I don't think he would be coming in with minimum dates because of how difficult it was last time. But there's a load of guys there that have got minimum dates. I believe most of them would have a 120. Last year, Oscar worked 54 dates, and she was the person that worked the most dates. So when nobody fulfilled their minimum requirement, it makes it easier to release people because everybody in some way breached their contract last year, and WWE kept them on. So 2020 makes it a lot easier for you to fire people and say we're within our rights to do it. So that's another thing no one's really touched on.
Yeah. Let me ask you 2 questions to see what you think about this. So there's 2 things I keep hearing. A lot of these budget cuts are because he's going to sell the company, which I don't think he will, but I could be wrong. And the second one is that he's letting a lot of these people go knowing that Tony's going to pick them up and he's going to have to deal with all these huge, and also have the problem that there's not going to be enough TV for all these stars that are there. What do you say to those 2 things?
I don't think they're selling the company. I think that if they get the right offer, they'll sell the company. And I think the front runner for that would be NBC Universal because that's the one that they're in bed with. I think the relationship with Fox is done. I think
really?
I think 100% is done. When Fox came in and got CM Punk and WWE back together, the idea was that he would end up working there in the end. So when Fox reached out to WWE after they'd spoken to Punk and knew that AEW had put money down on the table, WWE then straight up said to Fox, instead of even having a conversation with Punk, they ended up sending them this flow chart, basically explaining that, this is what John Cena has done for our ticket sales, where John Cena has moved a couple of thousand tickets since he was announced at nearly every single arena. They're talking about merchandise sales. From my information, they used Punk. We know that Punk wasn't a big star until 2011, but they are talking to Fox about Punk being there from 2007 and 2014 and not being the same level star as Edge and John Cena. So trying to justify the $3 million a year that they're paying Edge as opposed to why they won't pay it to Punk, which is what I believe Tony Khan is paying Punk. So, and WWE trying to explain to Fox why it wasn't worth it. Fox didn't really buy into this and decided to turn around to WWE and say, whatever you think he's worth, we'll pay the rest. And WWE, then we got the real reason where they turned around to him and said, he's toxic, he's moody, he's bad for the locker room, nobody likes him, nobody wants him here, we don't want him in our locker room, we don't want to deal with CM Punk. So that's when, after pissing Fox around and Fox coming back to them and saying, we'll pay the rest of the money to have him on SmackDown, they then turn around and said, we just don't want him backstage. So
how would Fox know how popular Punk was? That's pretty weird that they wanted him as part of the deal.
They got to have some type of marks there for wrestling if they're paying him $200 million a year in rights fees.
The guy that brokered the whole deal, it was Nick Khan that brokered the deal, but the guy who works for Fox is a mark, and he is a wrestling fan, and he looked at the markets. The whole deal was done on the premise that the West Coast was underperforming, which is why we were supposed to have 2 West Coast WrestleManias at 37 and 38, because there's been a massive dip in Hispanic viewership, and the WWE and Fox felt like they could bring it back on the West Coast because that was a massive.
Did they?
No, they haven't, because obviously the pandemic is hit and they don't know where they're at with everything. But looking at what their numbers were doing, they felt like there was a massive hole that the WWE were not exploiting and that they could. But obviously all of these plans have not come into play. The numbers holding at around 2 million, which is nowhere near what it was supposed to be. But I think they still would have got some leeway through Fox through this over the next couple of years. When they made that full commitment to NBC, when they went over to Peacock, that really pissed off Fox. The Punk thing has pissed off Fox. The fact that WWE already know that the next contract, the money is going to be in streaming services because Apple and Prime are desperate to get on the map with live sports, with live events. That's what Prime and Apple are trying to do. So they know they can get a ridiculous deal on Amazon Prime or Apple when they next renew, especially Apple. Apple are absolutely desperate to get involved in live streaming. So I think that's where the new home will be.
And here's the other thing, bro. When Punk does show up in AEW, they're really going to look even worse. You know what I'm saying? Because he's going to melt that place.
What do you think? If you were looking at a number, do you think they clear 1.5 with Punk there? Do you think they actually beat Raw that week?
Maybe.
Wow, that's a good question. I think so. I think the interest is going to be at an all-time high.
I don't know. Here's why.
What is the all-time high is 1.5, right? So
yeah,
I don't know.
No, 1.4 is their high. Right. That was because the very first show was 1.4. But here's the thing: you can get to 1.4. But my whole thing is like they recently had a surge. Like a 3-week thing in rating. Like it's tapered off, but it has actually gone down 2 weeks in a row, right? So, and like the one thing that we know is that like you can get spikes, but the spike is like the COVID. It just reaches a point, and then it kind of the numbers come back down and stuff. But I don't know if you're talking 30% of your audience, of the people, like you're going to have a 30% spike in ratings because of Punk. I don't see that.
Well, I think I'll tell you why. Only because the curiosity factor. You may have WWE people that are curious to see, and the AEW and the word's going to get around, and everybody's going to want to see this guy show up in Chicago. What the he's going to say or do? I think there's kind of an excitement behind that. I think they're going to do maybe 1.5. I don't know.
Let me say this real quick. Just that there's guys like me who watched when Punk was on top and would watch pay-per-views with a group of friends. Most of that group of friends doesn't watch AEW. But if Punk's going to come out, or I know it, or I suspect it, I'll text them and say, hey, I think Punk's joining AEW. And a few are going to watch us to see. But I'm not the only one that's going to do that. There's going to be a lot of people that are going to be texting their lapsed fan friends and going, hey, Punk and Brian both jumped. You might want to check this out. And that could add to their, total rating.
Like I said, we'll see. We'll see.
What do you think, Bill?
And I want to add to what Joe said. We get AEW here on ITV2, and it comes on Friday night. So obviously, it takes place Wednesday, and I wait till Friday to watch it. I've now subscribed to a Fight TV, which is $9.99 a month, so that I can get AEW live when that comes around. So yeah, I've already put my money into it. It's only $10, but yeah, I already.
We could have sent you a link. We have a link for all the shows.